Well, hello. Don't mind me, it's Mask Monday. If you know, you know. Siempre viva, forever young. So I have researched and researched and researched, and I have found nothing on the cost of Prince Philip's funeral. Every article and anything that I have read always simply leads into how much the Queen Mother's funeral costs. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you right now, but I would assume way less than Queen Elizabeth's funeral. Obviously, the late Duke of Edinburgh died during the height of the pandemic, and his funeral was very, very scaled down. He did not have a technical state funeral, which cut a lot of costs because you didn't have to, of course, pay for police and security, blockades, and everything that went into, I would say, everybody else's funeral. But let's move on. The price of the late Queen Mother was around £5.4 million. That was for her funeral. She, of course, died in 2002, and she had a full state funeral. The late Diana, Princess of Wales's funeral cost between £3 to £5 million. For those who may not know, her funeral was actually modeled after the Queen Mother's funeral because technically during the time of her death, she wasn't a technical married member of the royal family, even though she was still regarded as a member of the royal family, being the mother of a future king. In a technical sense, she wasn't necessarily entitled to a royal funeral, so to speak, and the royal family wanted it to be more so a private matter dealt by the Spencers. Obviously, the public sentiment was completely different. She is and was a beloved figure. Therefore, she received a technical state funeral, but effectively she received the same funeral that the Queen Mother did years later. One thing to add, with today's value and the cost of inflation and all of that, her funeral would now be around £11.8 million. Unfortunately for King George VI, I cannot find anything regarding how much his particular funeral cost in 1952. However, if I do find something, I will do an update. His father, though, King George V's funeral cost around 25,000 British pounds in 1936 at the time of his death, which in today's value is around 2.2 million pounds. The late King Edward VII's funeral cost was around 40,500 pounds in 1911, which in today's value is around 6.1 million pounds. He was known to already be a lavish king, so this makes sense for him. Last but surely not least, the Queen Victoria, Empress of India. At the time of her death in 1901, her funeral cost £35,000, which in today's value is around 5.1 or 2 million pounds. Obviously, in the future, when those of us or even people years from now are looking back at the cost of Queen Elizabeth's funeral, and you couple that with inflation and whatever the value of the dollar is or pound is at that time, it could be even more expensive or be seen as even more expensive. I can imagine that even for those times, for everyone else that came before Queen Elizabeth's funeral, pretty sure it was thought to be expensive in itself. However, I will say the difference is probably the security they didn't have to have necessarily back then. Obviously, there were still threats, but I think the types of threats that they would have had back then is a bit different versus the types of threats that we would have now. And considering she reigned for 70 years and she was pretty beloved, I mean, let's just be honest, it makes sense for her specific funeral to be as expensive as it was. And I don't mean that in the sense of, they should have spent over $200+ million. I'm not saying that. I am just saying it makes sense on why they spent so much money because of the person that she was. So thank you so much for your question, and I hope I answered it. I'm sorry I didn't really get you an answer for Prince Philip. I would probably speculate his funeral costs maybe between 200 to 400,000 pounds. And that's a speculation, honestly. But What do you guys think Prince Philip's funeral costs? Comment your thoughts below. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Bye.